A young girl is walking through the streets of ancient Rome. Thousands of people are watching. Nobody speaks. Nobody cries. Nobody tries to help her, because everyone believes she deserves what's about to happen. She isn't being taken to prison. She isn't being executed. She isn't going to fight in an arena. Instead, she is about to disappear beneath the earth while she's still alive. The Romans believed killing her would anger the gods, so they invented something even more terrifying. They buried her alive and called it justice. How could one of the world's greatest civilizations create such a punishment? The answer begins decades earlier. Long before this girl was condemned, she was considered one of the holiest people in Rome. She was a Vestal Virgin. Thousands of years ago, Romans believed their entire civilization depended on one small flame. It burned inside the Temple of Vesta. The fire never went out. Not during war. Not during famine. Not during plague. As long as that flame burned, Rome believed the gods were protecting them. But someone had to guard it. Not soldiers. Not priests. Little girls. Between 6 and 10 years old, girls from respected Roman families could be chosen to become Vestal Virgins. The moment they were chosen, their lives changed forever. They left their families. They moved into the house of the Vestals, and they belonged to Rome. For the next 30 years, their entire life revolved around duty. They woke before sunrise. They cared for the sacred fire. They performed rituals, prepared offerings, protected holy objects, and took part in ceremonies that ordinary Romans would never see. They lived inside one of the safest places in the empire. People respected them. Even powerful politicians stepped aside to let them pass. If a condemned prisoner accidentally met a Vestal Virgin on the way to execution, Roman law sometimes allowed that prisoner's life to be spared. That was how sacred they were. But holiness came with one impossible rule. They had to remain virgins. Not for a year, not for 5 years, for 30 years. No marriage, no children, no romantic relationships, nothing. Why? Because the Romans believed the Vestal Virgins represented the purity of Rome itself. If one broke her vow, the gods might abandon the city. Today, that sounds like superstition, but to the Romans, it was a matter of survival. Imagine living your entire childhood, your teenage years, and most of your adulthood, knowing one accusation could end your life, even if you were innocent. And sometimes, that was exactly what happened. Whenever Rome suffered a terrible disaster, people searched for someone to blame. A military defeat, a famine, a plague, an earthquake. If fear spread through the city, rumors spread even faster. Maybe the sacred fire had angered the gods. Maybe one of the Vestal Virgins had broken her vow. Sometimes there was evidence. Sometimes there wasn't. Ancient historians describe several cases where Vestal Virgins insisted they were innocent. But fear has a way of changing justice, especially when an entire empire believes its survival depends on one verdict. Once found guilty, there was no escape. Execution was forbidden, not because the Romans were merciful, because a Vestal Virgin was sacred. Spilling her blood would be a crime against the gods. So Rome found a loophole, one that still shocks historians today. On the day of the punishment, the condemned Vestal Virgin wore white. Her hands were tied, not to humiliate her, but to stop her from resisting. The streets fell silent. Citizens lined both sides of the road. Some prayed. Some looked away. Others watched in complete silence, because they believed Rome itself depended on this moment. Outside the city walls waited a small underground chamber. It looked almost ordinary. Inside was a tiny room, a wooden bed, a loaf of bread, a jug of water, an oil lamp, just enough to say Rome hadn't technically killed her. The priests led her down the stairs. Then they climbed back out. She remained alone. Workers sealed the entrance with heavy stones. There was no audience anymore. No final speech. No dramatic forward. Just silence and darkness. Ancient writers rarely described what happened next. Perhaps they couldn't bear to imagine it. Perhaps they didn't need to, because everyone already knew how the story ended. The punishment wasn't designed to be witnessed. It was designed to satisfy the gods and calm a frightened civilization. History remembers Rome for its roads, its aqueducts, its empire. But beneath all that greatness, was a civilization terrified of losing the gods' protection. Fear made intelligent people believe impossible things. Fear changed justice. Fear buried innocent people alive. And maybe that makes this story feel strangely familiar, because civilizations still search for someone to blame, especially when they're afraid. The Romans thought they were saving their world. Instead, they revealed what fear can make ordinary people accept. Sometimes the darkest part of history isn't what people did. It's what everyone else allowed to happen. The chamber eventually disappeared beneath layers of earth. The empire that built it also disappeared. Its laws vanished. Its emperors became history. But the lesson survived. Fear can convince good people to accept terrible things, especially when everyone else believes it too. History rarely repeats exactly, but human nature often does. The real reason this story still matters, because the next civilization won't think it's making the same mistake. And that's exactly why history is worth remembering. Thousands of years have passed, yet the story of the Vestal Virgins still survives. Not because it was glorious, but because it forces us to ask difficult questions. How much fear is enough to make ordinary people accept the unthinkable? Maybe that's the real mystery of ancient Rome. Not what happened, but why so many people accepted it. History doesn't always warn us with monsters. Sometimes it warns us with ordinary people, people who believed they were doing the right thing. And that's what makes this story unforgettable. Because history isn't only about the past. It's a mirror that asks what we would do today.